Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Sisto Says, powered by Design 2147, a New York City code and expediting firm. Today, I have a longtime friend who I haven't seen in a long time, Angel Ayon from Ayon Studios.
Ayon Studio. Good to see you, my friend.
It's been a long time, my friend.
I know.
So the power of people.
Yes.
I always start my show off about talking about how a guest gets to come on the show. And actually, it's pretty easy. All you got to do is reach out. But Angel and I go back a long way. When design first started 38 years ago, one of our biggest early clients was WASA, Mike Adams Slave and Associates. Mm-hmm. And there was a gentleman, to give you background, that when myself, Dominic, and Sergio, the three partners, we worked at a plumbing company. And when we worked at that plumbing company, we did drafting and we did shop drawings. We did coordination drawings, everything related to plumbing and mechanical and sprinkler. And that's really how we got a lot of our background besides going to City College together. But there was an infamous person who worked there before us. And his name was no other than Len Franco. Your mentor.
Len Franco was my mentor. He hired me at WASA, and he's still a really good friend. And I'm going to see him for lunch in the next few days. So.
And actually, we still talk to Lenny.
He's a good friend.
And it's amazing how a college professor once told me that if you go into the world of architecture in New York City, it's very incestuous. And it is, there are so many connections in so many places. So you have a great story, Angel, and I'm glad you're here to tell us a little bit about today. But your travels to come from Cuba to Washington, D.C., to make your way to New York City to be, I want to say, a conservationist for our landmarks and our buildings. So tell us a little bit about that journey, because it really is interesting. You know, most of us say, oh, well, we grew up in New York City. We went to City College or New York Tech or Columbia, and we became architects. But here we have a different path.
So my dad is a contractor, and I tell people I've been on the job site since I was 6 years old. And I always hated it. Hated smell cement on my hands, getting up so early, having to go to sleep
and
so
hot.
early. Oh, gosh. But I had all that background on me, and I grew up. I went on to become an architect. I went to School of Architecture there. And then when I graduated, the options over there were either you go to work for tourism or you go to work for preservation endeavors, and I chose to go with preservation. And Old Havana is an amazing place. There's so much going on there. Plaza Vieja was being demolished. All this construction and all this stuff, and I was just right there at the place where they were doing all that, and then they were teaching a master's in historic preservation there, and I was like, all right, I'll take the master's in preservation, and I fell in love with the stuff, man. I fell in love with the notion that you have this dilapidated place that
can be repurposed.
Exactly. That had value, it had meaning. It doesn't look that good right now, but you can learn how to read it and how to bring it back and how to change it and make it work, make it functional, make it livable, and then just bring something that has character, for meaning.
It's funny that you bring that up because last week, I celebrated my 36th anniversary with my wife. And she says, well, what? Yeah, thank you. She says, what do you want to do? I said, well, you know what? I want to go up to Buffalo, New York. She goes, the only thing in Buffalo is the Niagara Falls. I said, no, there's some pretty good hidden gems. And she says, what are you talking about? And she's been to a couple of other Frank Lloyd Wright buildings. And we decided to go to the Martin House and to go to Great Cliff. And when we were there, she loves it. Mm-hmm. She knows nothing about architecture, but she loves the story of the people who live in that home. And I think that's the part that I love about landmarks, is the history of it. Why? It's not just putting it back together, but understanding who it was built for, why it was built, what was their mission statement when they were building it, right?
Exactly.
What were they trying to achieve? And what's our job to uphold that?
How did they bring that guy from Wisconsin all the way up there to design an amazing house for them? And in that case, also, the amazing house, right? The experience,
15,000 square feet.
the experience of space. Nothing like going through this little, little
Well,
vestibule,
you
and then
probably
you
can't
go.
fit in most of them.
I
It was
know.
perfectly designed for
It's
me
right
because
here.
they say he built the perfect house for a man who's 5'7". So I was perfect.
So at 6'2", I always struggle a little bit,
Oh,
but
forget
then
it.
a few more steps, and then you get into a
Right.
bigger
He
place. And
compresses
yeah,
you to bring you
exactly.
up.
So
But what was amazing about that, and we talk about preservation, how the building changed hands and how they added additions and they did. And then the conservatory went back, found the original plans and says, okay, we're going to bring it back. But if you think about it, he created the open floor plan. Because everything else, Queen Anne, Queen Victorian, Tudors, they all had these chopped up spaces.
too many
And
walls.
right, too many walls. And but the part that I love about New York City, and we're working on a project right now together, which is a library, but anything in preservation, when we get the jobs and you talk to the architects, they're so passionate about the history of it, the people that live there. And that's not easy because now you have a client that needs a function and a program, but yet you have to achieve this and that.
And then they have a budget,
Right.
and then they want it to be lead, and then we're like, okay, what do we do here? And there's a lot of design ideas. I actually was there this morning, checking out the probes. We made a whole bunch of probes
At the library?
At the library, yes. And I wanted to see the probes. I told my staff, I want to go there. One of the things, this library had to be designed to LEED standards. So the big question there is, how much insulation should we include on those walls, and do we have any room for insulation? And I wanted to know, because I've seen all the renovation on some of the plans, and I had the question as to what's behind the walls, what's behind the plaster finish.
And it's fun. You bring out a great point that, a lot of the DTC projects, and this is no knock. I'm always appreciative of every dollar that the city gives back to the children, especially in libraries. We've done a lot of libraries. We've done them at Columbia. We did it at Kingsborough Community College. Very famous libraries. And over the years, materials have changed, budgets change. So sometimes you go, one side has like, oh my God, this is great. And then you go to the other side of the building and you're like, oh my God, this has nothing. like what happened here? But that's the evolution of, unfortunately, city funded projects. Sometimes they need it, but they don't have the money to do it maybe to the T.
Yeah, and then what's is really cool that I'm there and I'm explaining to the staff. Okay, well, all the on the lower levels, most of those walls they have 3-coat platinum wood lath. That's probably the original 1928 interior wall finish. But what I'm seeing on the upper levels on the second floor, that is a 3-coat platinum metal lath. That's going to be a little bit later, and that's going to become because that
Right. It's starting to tell the
and
story.
then now I'm looking at the ceiling probe, and I was like, well, if you look closely, you'll see the wood joist, you'll see the primary framing, and you see the gulf of the old wood lath that was removed.
Yeah,
Because
right.
remember, we saw the drawings from 1968 when they put HVAC on this building. This building original didn't have air
had
conditioner,
HVAC.
right? So, and now we see the ductwork and all of that. So they demo all the ceiling, remove all of that, and then you can see the ghost steel there, put it all back in plaster with galvanized steel mesh and so on. And so the more you dig into the building, the more
tells the story.
you understand what are you looking at, what's going on here, what happened. You confirm what happened on all these drawings that we spend time looking at it. And I just find that part fascinating, just to be able to read through the history and then learn from the building and figure out how to bring it back. It's just
The thing that always amazes me about landmarks is I always try to think of the craftsman. Like, you look at that, some of the, people walk around New York City and they're in a rush. I'm never in a rush. I'm always walking around looking, and sometimes I walk past something and I go, oh, who designed that? And then 3 buildings later, you're like, oh my God, look at this brickwork. This is amazing. Like, how did they draw it? How did they detail it? Who was the lead person who watched hundreds of men lay this brick to this, to that precise scale. It's just
that level of quality. And we were talking about that this morning because then I said, oh my goodness, we only have like 2.5 inches from the inboard side of the wall to the plaster finish. We had no room for insulation.
Right.
So that means that we had to remove all those plaster finishes probably. And then there's all this millwork. And if you can remove it and salvage it. But the back of the library is round. So that's in that room. If you remove it, when you build up the wall and you try to put it back, it's a different right eye. So it's not going to fit in. So how do we deal with that?
And there's always cost.
Yes.
Yes, you could make it work, right?
Everything has a lot of value.
Everything.
And that is actually what the preservation specialization or the preservation background really comes handy. You try to understand what has value, what can and cannot be done, what should or should not be done, and then try to strike the right balance between all these conflicts and interests.
It's funny how the landmark preservation, right? So a good colleague of ours, and we do a lot of work with them. Shout out to Annie Holford Smith, right? Who was part of Landmarks for a long time, and she came in and she did the show, and she was awesome. And we talked about it, and as code consultant and expediters, we get the greatest landmark questions. They'll call us. Architect, could be a contractor. A lot of times, most of the times, the contractor, never the architect. But sometimes architects call us and they'll say, "Well, I don't understand. The building code says we have to put in fresh air to our boiler room, but they won't approve us to put a grill on the front of the
hole
building."
in the wall.
And I said, no, it's not that they won't approve the grill. They don't like the grill that you want to give them. So you have to go do your homework. You got to go back. Was the building built in 1928? What did the louvers look like in the front of a building? They're not saying you can't have it. What they're saying is you can't put a 2025 grill on the front of our building that was built in 1904. So it's funny how they're like, oh, they won't let us. No, they'll always let you. You just have to adhere to what the time and what the architecture meant at that moment.
And I actually think that yes, that actually makes it harder. Because sometimes you just can't do the obvious. You can't just do it the easy. You can't just put the grill right there.
You gotta love it.
You have to think it through to figure out what do I do, because it's not just that room. It's all that what comes with it, and how do I fit it in? And it can't be here. It can't be there.
We had a call a couple of weeks ago where they said, oh, the doors aren't functional. We're losing way too much heat. We don't have a vestibule. They're too big. They're breaking. And I said, okay, great. And they're like, well, we want to remove them and put something else back. I said, okay, well, then you're going to need a really, really strong architect with preservation. And I can almost rest assure you that they're not going to want to take the doors off. They were going to try to find an alternate method to put a heat curtain or to do something.
Do something else.
Right. And I even as the code consultant, I was steering them in the direction that I knew that if they spent 3 months trying to figure out, I mean, these doors were beautiful. They were bronze doors. I mean, but I get it. Every time they opened it, the wind was blowing right through it, and
Maybe you had a second set of doors.
Right. So they had to create a vestibule. So it's interesting, but definitely I found over the last couple of years of the people that I've interviewed that were in the landmark preservation, like yourself, is that the mindset is quite different. It's quite different. It's methodical, and everyone I've ever interviewed loves what they do. They love it.
You gotta love it, man.
You gotta love it.
You gotta love it to stand in front of a commission of 11 people who are gonna grill you, and they're gonna tell you, "Can you do this and that?" And then your client, on the other hand, "Hey, come on, man, I want this."
But I think
you gotta love it.
I think that's what makes New York City so special.
I think so, and also, I was somebody said something. Morris at Jamie, he does a lot of work for new buildings and historic buildings and so on. And a few months ago, I was at an event where the former chair was leaving, and it was a little, get together.
For landmarks.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes. And a few people said a few words, and Maury said something like that. He said something like, I present a lot of work here. I've done that over the years, but you guys always, you always have comments, but I have to acknowledge that what we do is always better because of your input. And I was like, actually, man, you're right. This is
Well,
exactly what
yeah,
this
and
preservation stuff is about.
there's a saying that I once learned from a mentor of mine is never get emotionally attached to the comment. Because the minute you're emotionally attached, then you're in trouble.
Yeah.
So if you're not emotionally attached, you can take anyone's comment, anyone's objective view, and say, well, maybe they have a point. What am I missing? And I think that that's part of landmark preservation, that you see it a certain way, someone else could see it in a certain way, and then there's history. And once you blend it all together, there's always a compromise, right? And we do a lot of townhouses, a lot in Brooklyn, and on the Upper East Side and the Upper West Side. And people come to me, well, why do I have to paint my windows brown? Because everybody else on the block has them brown. You could maybe change some other things, but you're gonna need a black door and black trim or brown. And these are the colors you could use. Yeah, but I bought the building like this. Okay, so the other gentleman or woman didn't paint the house properly, doesn't give you the right to maintain it. So there's a lot of obvious things that we see, but there's a lot of other things that are so intricate. Where does my Siamese go? Where does the louver go? What kind of gate do I want? What kind of doorknob do I? And you wouldn't think that there's that much of it is. Sometimes it doesn't go down to that detail because the preservationist already knows.
Yeah.
You know.
And that's where we can make a difference, right? Someone who has the skill set and the understanding of what the landmarks rules are. What are the precedents?
What are the standards?
What are the standards? But also what's appropriate, right? What's gonna fly and what's not gonna fly, right? You know that building, the front of the wall, it's not gonna fly. Don't even think about it.
Don't
Right?
put the Siamese right there. You
Right?
know they're not going to accept
Don't
it.
give me a chrome Siamese,
Right.
right in the front. No, you know what? There's bronze. We know that.
Right.
And it looks way better than that chrome thing.
Right.
So having that background and understanding, it's really part of what we contribute. And you're right. You have to be careful. You have to be methodical, because you have to come through all that is being proposed, everything, and think it through. How could it be? How can I make this better? Is that the right spot? Is that the right material, the right finish? How can I
Correct.
change this? What are they gonna tell me? What are they?
Right.
Gonna
And what is your client going to tell you?
Exactly.
But one of the things that's probably overlooked in this entire conversation so far is, and I'm gonna lay it on you a little thick now, is your responsibility to pass that on to your staff. Your passion for it is the success of the next generation of landmark. And that, I say that here, and I'm sure we do it and we don't even know we're doing it, but we have a responsibility. And that responsibility for you is the same way Lenny Franco took you under your his wings. You're taking the next generation of architects and preservationists and conservationists to say, hey, I accept that role, and what I love and what I do, I'm going to pass this on to the next group. And in today's generation, that's not easy. Everybody wants something new. Everybody wants something shiny,
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, for me, yes. First and foremost, it's pay forward.
Right.
I'm not here because I'm great and because I'm super intelligent or because I'm super capable. I'm here because I put up my time and I made my effort and I pay attention, and I've been super lucky to have the mentorship of so many people like Lenny and many others, Pam, who was also at that office,
Yeah.
Pam Jerome, and many others back to Cuba who really spend the time and care in training me, in teaching me, and making me a better professional. And I try to do that with the staff. And yes, and I also do it because what you said, because I also know that we have the responsibility to my clients and to myself and to the business to get it right. So
Of course.
for me, there's nothing like going there this morning to just understand what the pros are and explain to everyone what are we looking at, so we're all on the same page.
Correct.
And nobody's gonna say a word that is just not going to be accurate and clear and really, clear depiction of what we're dealing with and the issues, and more importantly, to figure out how do we move forward. What does it really mean? What are we making pros in this building? It's just to really inform the conversation about what comes next. Do we need to insulate those walls? Does it really mean that we have to remove all this 1920s
What
plastic
other
finish?
options are available?
What do we do? What do we do? Is this the only way to do it? Can we get a LEED building in the 1920? Can we turn a 1928 building into a LEED rated facility, LEED platinum, right? Without insulating those walls? Probably not. And then how do we do it? How do
And
we
having the options and having the right, because it's easy if it was just okay, just do this and we're done. In this particular case, it creates and it's probably someone who walks by that building that doesn't know would say, okay, big deal, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Right,
yeah.
but they know,
And
the world knows.
And also, the job is not about, at least from a preservation perspective, the job is not about making a grand statement, right?
Right.
It's about getting it right, doing the right thing, and being careful about it, being meticulous about it, being detailed about it, and then leaving behind something that when people come back to the building, they feel like, oh, actually,
This was a great experience.
This looks really nice. I like it. I like it. I don't know what's going on. Maybe it's a little bit warmer. Maybe the windows, were better. The acoustically sounds better. The lighting is better. All these things, and that's the job. That's the job. We take all these assets have been granted to us, and we have that responsibility to, bring them forward to the next generation. So we're lucky to be able to do that.
Absolutely. So not only are you an architect, not only did you get mentored by probably someone who mentored me for a long time, Lenny Franco, but then you went on to write a book. So today we're going to talk a little bit about it for a few minutes. The name of the book is called Reglazing Modernism. So I'm always intrigued because my children always say to me, Dad, you should write a book about something, whether it's your travels, whether it's about your Fran, who's the producer from Why Not You Media, always says to me, Sister, we want to get you on the camera for you to tell us about the things you thought you did well in business, the mistakes you made in business, your greatest achievements, your lows. And so to me, undertaking a book and being able to say to the world, hey, I'm ready to tell my story. So tell us a little bit about the book. Tell us how it inspired you to do it.
Yeah. Well, first, I want to see that movie because I want to learn from what you had to say, and I think it's going to be great. This book is a labor of love. It all came out of a job. When I was working with Len and Pamela, we were the architects for the restoration of the Guggenheim Museum.
Yeah.
And I was the project architect. And I had the privilege of, documenting that building, doing the preservation stuff, understanding what was going on, understanding it, how it was all put together, really understanding what the materials were, and changing this and changing that. You may recall all those drawings that we prepared with the cracks in the facade, and working with Silman and ICR and all the assessment and understanding, how do we deal with the concrete and so on. But there was one scope that we were able to develop by ourselves, and I worked with Lenny very closely on this, that had to do with the windows and the skylines. And, the museum has the big rotunda space, and then it has the little three-story wing called the Monitor. That's how Fran Lloyd Wright called it originally, and it's known today as the Townhouse or Galleries. And those are all original steel frame windows, not thermally broken.
Which is Frank Lloyd Wright's claim to fame.
Beautiful design with the scallops and so on. And as you can imagine, as the building went from the original construction to meet international museum studies standards, now you're pumping, highly humidified air to try to maintain 50 degrees and 70 Fahrenheit and 50 degree relative humidity. So in the winter, there were a lot of issues about
Right.
the performance.
Those steel windows were terrible.
So we had this amazing situation of having original steel frame windows designed by a prominent architect and a very distinguished prominent building that were in really good physical condition, but performed very poorly. And then we went through the analysis and trying to figure out what do we do? Do we do this? Do we put it? How we do this? And I remember that we presented 18 options to the Landmarks Preservation Commission, and we said, and I this is one that I work with land, back and forth, and it was really amazing. But we concluded at that time that in order for us to be able to represent to the museum that the dollars that they would spend would be spent wisely and would prevent any kind of issue, not just in
Functionality.
in terms of condensation, but also, the museum is all about the relationship between the interior and the exterior, the views of Central Park and so on. Imagine when you're there, it's all foggy. That doesn't work. So that we would actually do something that would be appropriate. And at that time, replacement with the thermally broken steel frame system was the option that we figured that it would be, more suitable. And we went out to ask people, well, do you have a thermally broken steel frame system? And they said, no. And we said, how come? And they said, nobody's asking for that. And this is 2004, 2008. And so we went ahead and designed a custom steel frame system that, to my knowledge, was the first thermally broken steel frame system installed
That's a big deal.
in America, and it's still there, and it's still performing very well. But that it really made an impact on me, because it made me think that actually it's kind of like the opposite of everything I knew about preservation, where you treasured the original historic fabric, especially if it shows exceptional design, all the things that we knew. And then it made me really think about, well, is this what happens with modern buildings? Do you just remove it all? Does it have to be replacement? Are there any other ways to do it? And we did that work. I'm proud of the work we did. I think it's still performing, and that was the right thing to do.
Of course.
But the more I look around and the more I learn about other projects, oh, look in that building, they did this. Oh, look at this other, they did this. And eventually it became very clear to me that this was not just
It wasn't a fluke.
a personal thought, but there was a professional issue that needed to be addressed in terms of what were the appropriate intervention approaches for modern glaze enclosure that are so relevant on defining the character of modern architecture. So in 2014, when I went on my own and I started Ayon studio, I thought that I would have all the time in the world, and I say, oh, I'm gonna apply to this mid-career fellowship, and I'm gonna get some funding to see if I can, do this reglazing modernism. I had a good name on it, and I got the fellowship, and I did the research, and I put together a number of case studies, and man, when that was over, it was very clear to me that could not be a PDF in some non-profits organization's shelf, that it really needed to be put out there.
Oh, good for you.
So the book has 20 case studies in the U.S. and throughout the U.S. and Europe of significant modern buildings that had some type of intervention on their steel frame assemblies, and we are presenting those case studies through the three main intervention categories of repair, or restoration, rehabilitation, and replacement. Yes, replacement is also appropriate when pertinent, but not always. And it's all about trying to put our options and create a discussion, right, about what are the options, what are the appropriate different intervention approaches. It's about learning from other case studies and disseminating information, creating best practices, and creating a conversation about, what do you do with these kind of buildings, and who did what, but also why, and what exactly was done. And
Incredibly interesting.
so,
Incredibly interesting. As we wind the show down, when I was a young man before I went Brooklyn Tech. I had a friend of mine who was my mentor. His name was Joe Simmons. He went to Cooper Union at night. And I'll never forget, I was probably 12 or 13. He had an apartment on West End Avenue. And I went to see him. And he had his studio in his apartment. And he once said to me, he said, you know, sister, when you leave here today, a window will never be the same for you. You will never look at a window the same way. And it was so profound at like 13 years old. I didn't get it. Because I told him I wanted to be an architect. And he goes, it's not there just to open it to let air in. It's not there to open it and let light in. Let air out. It's not there just for you to look out, but it has a purpose. And I always remember that. And here you are years later, right? Case studies of going back and trying to understand the purpose of that window and creating a book about it. I mean, it's for whatever that reason was, the view, the this, the that, whatever it is, this, and you know, that's one of the things that always amazes me about Frank Lloyd Wright, that back in 1920, in 1905, 1910, he had this vision and he didn't care what other people thought. He didn't care about anything. He was about his vision, his thoughts, and and I use the word loosely, his craziness, because he was definitely a madman when it came to shapes and just the way he thought of everything. But here we are, and you wrote a whole book about glazing, and that's incredible. So I will say, I'm sure there were other guests that were on this show that wrote a book, but it was never publicized. So congratulations to being our first guest.
Thank you.
We look forward to seeing your next book, which I hear is in the works. And Angel, this was great. This was absolutely great. I love to talk about conserving our buildings and taking on the responsibility of passing that on to the next generation of architects. And someday I will guarantee you will be part of the Landmark family. As somewhere on that in that group, you're going to be there and helping preserve all our great icons that we have here in New York City. Appreciate you coming in, taking the time out. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for having me. Great to see you.